Is that the guy?
No, it's just everyone signing on. I'm muted. All right, cool. Now people get on. So, this is a strange mix. It's like all old people that like missed the chance when they were younger. Now they're retired and have time to do it. They're all excited about Vanessa White. Like the Facebook message
This
page.
is a reading. You know, we're doing a reading, so it's not that hard.
Hey, Chandra.
Just wanted to say hi.
Hi, Chandra.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good. Hi, Tim.
Sandra,
Hi, Anthony.
you're right below me.
Hey, Lori.
Who's that? Hey, John. Wait, who's that?
Tim is right. Tim is right above you.
I think we're all singing.
My group.
I gotta get situated.
Yeah, this puts this like thing back up, but it doesn't understand it's backwards. Music.
Jared and Mark.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
So I'm debating on, let me see if you guys can see this. I'm debating on whether or not to get this desk right here. See that desk?
Yeah.
Or this desk right here.
That one looks like executive light.
What do you guys think? So this desk.
You have a car?
Yeah, that one.
You guys think
The
this one?
one with more
Whatever's functional. Whatever's functional
Yeah,
for it.
whichever is the most functional. Is that one has a tray underneath?
Yeah, this one has a tray where you can like put a piano right there.
Yeah, that seems like the most.
Okay, you're gonna turn left on the Wari Point
I think
Parkway.
that desk
That's
also
the better one.
rolls. It also holds your CPU on the bottom, so that's kind of nice.
Yeah,
I like that
This one.
Hey, I like it. We're talking, hey, everybody. I like it. We're talking furniture. We're talking directions. Sorry, I mean to interrupt. I just see people are talking about desk purchases and stuff like that. It's great. Hope you're all having an amazing start to your week. I want to get this thing going as quickly as possible because there's a ton of stuff I want to cover. And I also want to have there be a ton of time to ask some questions. I got a hard out here at about 1:15. So we're going to action pack this thing for the next hour and 15 minutes. Let's see. So yeah. So this week we're going to be talking a lot about production. So now that we've gotten to the place where we're writing the types of songs that are marketable, they're licensable, really going in, doing the work that needs to get done to polish them up. You're doing the homework. It's been so great to see everybody, how they're getting the concepts. You're all doing such an amazing job working together on things, collaborating with each other. It's just very exciting to see the works in progress. And especially it was so fun, like that listening session last week was so great. Chris and I, we're still talking about it. We're just like blown away by like the level of quality that's there. It's like, wow, must be working what we're teaching because it's like definitely coming across in the quality of the work that you're submitting to us. So Yeah, you know, great there. So what I want to do, so I've been producing for a while. I've been writing for a while. I want to just basically kind of in the same way that I shared like all of my kind of philosophies and tips and tricks when it comes to songwriting. I want to kind of do the same thing when it comes to production, but in a little bit different way. So the way we're going to approach production today is first, we're going to talk about kind of like, you know, what you're looking for in a producer, what you're looking for in the production for licensing. And then I'm going to go into in great detail, kind of the negotiation and kind of like the process of deciding who to collaborate with and how that can kind of go down. Because I think that that's one thing that can be really confusing for people when they're first starting out, is like, how do I even go about like finding a producer? What's a fair way to go about, you know, negotiating with them? What do I know that I have in terms of leverage, and what do they have in terms of leverage? And how can we kind of meet together and come up with a situation that's good and is a win-win for both parties? So, so yeah, I'm just going to dive in though. As usual, I got a bunch of note cards here. I've also got a bunch of other stuff that I've written out ahead of time, and I'm just going to dive in here. Let's just start here. So first thing I want to just talk about with production that's really important. It really gets hammered home like every single guest we bring in. The question I ask them is like, what is it that you're listening for? What is like basically what catches somebody's attention rather than like, you know, it makes them hit the skip button. And it's really like the quality, the production quality has to be there. There's really no room in any of this for demo quality. Demo quality is not a thing in like, at least not in the commercial world of music. It's just, there's no room for it. Just in terms of like, as a product that you would try to sell. So for like, you know, the thing that can kind of suck about that is like, you know, the bar is much higher than perhaps it was, you know, 10 or 15 years ago. There used to be situations where you could just show a demo of something and they'd be like, yes, I want that. Can you give me a better version of it? It's just not the case anymore. It's more or less, they want to see kind of what the finished product sounds like, because a lot of times they'll want to just use whatever it is that they're listening to. So that's the first thing. So the bar is really high. You can't have a subpar effort at any stage. The quality has to be there. The end result has to sound, it just has to sound outstanding. Producing is all about bringing a relevant vibe and a high fidelity to records. So it's like, it's the right vibe mixed with high fidelity, modern high fidelity, is what you're looking for no matter what genre. You're looking to nail the vibe of the music. And then that basically, in the case that what we're working with, we're looking to nail the vibe of references and briefs, or just like the description of, sometimes they won't have specific references, but they're just looking for a specific vibe. So the vibe has to be there. And then also the production quality absolutely has to be there. I would say that producing involves skill and artistry. Obviously when it comes to vibes, like there's an artistry to creating the vibe, but then there's also the skill to know how to get to that sound that you're hearing in your head. It's almost like a B.B. King, legendary guitar player, obviously. I read in an interview once, he was like, I'm just kind of, this was a while back. He was like, I'm just getting to the point where I'm able to think something and then I can play it, like as I'm thinking. And not to say that we're talking about like one of the greatest guitar players of all time. You know, we're not looking to hold our producers up to that bar of things, but at the same time, it's like, does the producer have a cool idea? And then they're like, oh, I know how to get that as I'm like kind of thinking it up. So there's a creativity to it, but then there's also a practical kind of skills aspect to producing, where if it's not there, then the session can kind of get stagnant. It can kind of stutter. It can kind of, which can happen sometimes, especially if producers trying to do something they've never done before. It's totally cool to have that. But at the same time, I feel like the best producers are people who can they have an idea. They're like, yes, I hear it. Let's do it. So there's a skill and artistry. And then probably I would venture to say the most important thing outside of that, it might even be more important than that stuff, is like the interpersonal aspect of being a producer. Because you're in a room with somebody, you're creating such a sometimes a very intimate, very like emotionally vulnerable message, something that becomes very authentic, can be very like hard to share, but like the best stuff can kind of come from that place. Having a producer that you trust, having somebody that like who can somehow keep things like going and keep a good dialogue going, keep you involved, keep things like, I tend to keep things pretty light in the studio. I know other producers that do the same thing. I know some other producers that are more just like, let's get this done. It's more like checking off boxes. It might feel like to a certain extent, but they do great work. So there's different approaches, and depending on the producer's approach, it may or may not vibe well with what works well for you. I feel like this is a good one to say too, is like being a producer, there's a certain amount of like holding the space. It's almost like for example, like you could say like being a yoga teacher, because I have some experience with that. It's like you have to kind of sit in the seat, and you kind of have to own your job, your authority as a producer, because if you don't do that confidently, what can end up happening is that first you lose your vision for the project. And that's part of why somebody as an artist might go to a producer, is for their specific vision for something, because they feel like they have like can nail the vibe that they're looking for. So that's why it's important, for the most part to as a producer, you make decisions a lot. And if you can make them confidently, it certainly keeps things moving forward. Otherwise, like what can happen is you're second guessing yourself left and right. You're just like not getting things done because you are working on the snare drum for like 2 hours. It just can't happen for the most part. So that's where it's like there's this balance as a producer between like, having the vibe, making decisions, holding the space, and kind of directing where things are headed especially in terms of like the scheduling and all that stuff. That's also part of the producer's job. It's very, very important stuff. The goal of working with a producer is a record that draws you in immediately. So this is something that, once again, all the guests we bring on, they talk about this. You're usually not looking for like a long drawn out, unless the type of music is more like a slow burn kind of thing that develops over like a minute, and it's like a slower song. You would maybe have like a longer intro, but whether you have a long intro or an intro at all, the song has to catch your ear immediately. There's just no room for dead air. So the goal is to create a record that draws you in immediately, conveys the emotion and message of the song, and it's done to the deadline. So these all are things that when you're working with a producer, that they might be having in mind and making decisions based off of. So sometimes the deadline's less important. Sometimes it's really important, and that's going to dictate partially what gets done that day. There's situations with certain budgets and certain, just deadlines where it might not be possible to do more than like 3 takes of the lead vocal. Just because like there's no way you'll get the song done in time. You won't be able to do the edits. You won't be able to mix it, especially if you're doing like it's like a 1-day thing or it's like a 2-day thing. It might have to, some parts of the process might get accelerated as a result of that. But, regardless of that, we do have this high bar to meet. And, whether I think it's really important if you're looking to succeed in licensing, that you work with a producer who understands where the bar is and kind of where you need to get to, and especially making sure that it's in the budget that you have and the time frame that you're looking to have it done in. There's a trust relationship, and I feel like this is like so important as artists when you go and work with producers. And I would say to all the producers who are out here, I'd like to think that this talk that I'm having with you all right now is going to be just as helpful to the people who are more on the producing side than the songwriting side or the artist side. But it's really important, the relationships, the personal relationships that get built out of collaboration. There's a trust that can be built, and it's good for both sides to be able to come into things from that perspective and be willing to build a relationship, a trust relationship with the creative, partner, as it were, that you're choosing to work with. So I think that's like a big part of what makes for a good, it's what can make like an okay collaboration, like a really great collaboration, is when you have trust between both sides, and then a communication that is just direct and respectful. And then I think through the process of working through the ups and downs of producing something, at the end of the session or at the end of the track, whenever you're done working with them, there is a foundation that gets built, and then that's a foundation that you can choose to reinvest in time and time again. And I have many examples of they're now friends of mine, people that I just, like, at one point they were a client. So it's like these kinds of situations, you may find yourself like, you know, going in, working with somebody as an artist, hiring a producer, and then just, you know, you become friends, and then there's all kinds of things that can happen as a result of this. But like, I think that the thing that's most important that I'm trying to say is that if you don't have trust and you're not willing to trust whoever it is that you're kind of bringing into your creative world, you're really setting yourself up right from the beginning for failure. It's just really important to have that openness here in your chest, in your heart, and be willing to trust somebody to do their job. So there's a certain amount of that as well. It's like, you know, you wouldn't tell the plumber how to fix the sink necessarily unless they're really screwing it up. So it's like, to the same extent, you wouldn't tell the producer really what to do. And, you know, same thing goes both ways sometimes as well. You know, a producer who doesn't know really that much about playing the banjo probably wouldn't have too many things to say about their picking technique or something like that, but they might have suggestions. And I think that there's like a certain amount of, like, when you're building the relationships, that you have to, that there's two human beings, and you can never lose sight of that. The moment you lose sight of that and you just kind of start like flying off the cuff and making comments and things like that, I've maybe had like once or twice where an artist would come in and they're just kind of firing from the hip, and they're just like kind of being a little bit disrespectful. And those are the types of people that, as producers, you just don't want to work with them again, because it's just like they kind of see you as like, when somebody sees you as like somebody who's like taking an order at the drive-through from McDonald's and being kind of abusive, versus like, we're all human beings, like we're trying to create together. It's like, why would you ever want to work with somebody like that again? So, you know, just something to think about. Next thing. So what I want to talk about next is kind of the process of producing. The process of producing is, it's different for every situation is going to be different. Every producer is going to work differently. Sometimes you're going to be writing with the producer as they're building the track. That kind of stuff can happen, especially if you're hiring the producer to write as well as to produce your track. But I'm going to just give like some kind of general overall things that I find very helpful when it comes to understanding the entire process. So the first thing is pre-production. I think people blow over pre-production so much. It's actually really important. You will save yourself as well as your producer. If they know what they're doing, they'll save themselves a ton of time too, by doing this kind of stuff. So just making sure that you're really prepared to record the song that you're going to record. So the song, first off, and this is something that I learned pretty early on, the song has to be ready. Like, the song has to be done. Probably the first thing that I do anytime somebody comes into the studio and they want to record something with me, I have them pick up the guitar, pick up the piano, and I ask them to just like perform the song for me from beginning to end. And you would be surprised, there are a lot of times where they literally, like, after the maybe it's after the first chorus, maybe it's after like the second chorus, it just kind of meanders, and you can tell they don't really know where it's going after that. So one thing that I think is just, it's really important is to know what you're working with. Know the songs. You can't like work on any arrangement stuff until you know what the entire song is. You can't have any creative ideas around that until you understand what all the parts are. And then also, by hearing the entire performance, you can kind of hear some of the, anything that could need to be addressed about the song, the way it's being sung. Sometimes, like, if it rises up in intensity, you might not know that by just listening to the first verse, or just like, you know, if they haven't finished writing the song, that's another thing too. I've had times where I'm just like, okay, this is great. I want you to, if I'm not like involved in the songwriting and they didn't want me to be, I'm like, all right, that's great. Go in there and work on like a third verse or work on a bridge or something like that. I'll give you like a half hour. Let's see if we can come up with something. I want to get like the entire song that I can work with. So that's like the first thing is like knowing what you have to work with. The next thing, and this is really important too, is like people like to think like, I think this happens a lot that people, especially if they have a song that they have been writing for a long time, you know, maybe they've been playing it for a couple months and they've been working on it and tweaking it and everything like that. And they kind of have like a dead set, be very flexible and open-minded to changes in like the speed of the song as well as the key. So first thing to talk about is BPM. So there is a huge difference sometimes in like a couple BPM, beats per minute. Some songs will actually like sound like they're totally dragging if they're just 2 BPM slower. So the first thing I'm kind of wanting to know when I'm listening to a song or wanting to kind of figure out is, what is the application of the song? If it's like an upbeat kind of like, let's do this kind of thing, a lot of times the pace of the song might drag a little bit. Especially I'm thinking too, a lot of times if it's an acoustic songwriter or they're a pianist or something like that, and then they come in, they're not doing it in the context of a full band, which might have like more energy and more lift and more pep to it. So I'll sometimes do things crazy. Like I'll see what it sounds like 5 or 10 BPM faster, maybe even faster than that sometimes, just to see, push the edge there. If it's a song that I feel like needs a lot of energy. It also depends on the references too. I might tap out the BPMs on like some of the references they bring in just to kind of get a ballpark for like, you know, what are these songs kind of feeling like in terms of their balance and in terms of the tempo of them. So I feel like that's really important. And the key is also very important. I'll tell you why the key is so important. The key is really important primarily for me because of the vocalist. We want, when we're building songs, to have like, there be like a lot of times, now this isn't the case with every song, but most songs you want there to be like a peak vocal for the vocalist. You want there to be like a place in the track where they're they're really at their peak, maybe even pushing their peak, especially if it's like a really emotional moment. And if that's the case, you want that moment to sound so good. You want it to be in like the heart of their voice. You want them to be able to really project it. You want them to be able to like hit the note confidently and not have it like going all over the place pitch wise. That's a common thing, is that sometimes people will write songs and push themselves a little too much, thinking that it sounds better if it's in a higher register and if I can sing this high. And I found so many times it's a matter of like dropping it half a step. I'll start with maybe half a step, full step, even kind of work your way down from there. Just kind of see where it is that the vocal sounds the best. And then the mood that can kind of change the chords. Sometimes the chords will sound brighter if they're in a higher key. Sometimes they'll sound a little darker if they're in a lower key. They might sound a little more laid back if they're in a lower key. So it's just a matter of like finding the balance. So you're going to balance between the best performance of the vocalist and then what the track behind it sounds like. It's actually like doesn't take that long, and it might seem like a total pain when what you wanted to do was go in and like, you know, let's just get started with this thing. Let's start writing this thing. Let's start like recording this stuff. It's so important to take these like little steps, because these things will literally sometimes make or break a song. Because if a song is like too fast, it's going to sound like antsy. It's gonna, especially if you're like wanting something that's like a little more like laid back. If it sounds like it's pushing it too much, then it's going to sound like it's rushed. The emotion won't be right. And it's just like all about with the BPMs, like the speed of the song and the key, just like doing everything you can to make sure that you're getting the emotionally, like closest to the emotion that you're trying to deliver with it. So I do that like pretty much every single time I record a song with anybody. Arrangement, you want to kind of suss out, for the most part, you want to kind of suss out your arrangement ahead of time. So this is where it's like, what's your song? What do you have to work with? And then the producers are great resources on, you know, basically like taking the ideas you have and kind of helping you arrange them in a way that's like more compelling than it possibly would be if the producer wasn't involved. Like they might decide, why don't we just like front load the whole song with the chorus? Like that's a classic move that a lot of times it can, like, if you want to get people's attention right off the bat, it's a great trick, but it's just one of many. And then, you know, it's just a matter of like, you know, ahead of time, you don't have to like figure out everything up front. I tend to do like more of that than some producers, but I'm also open if I'm like, oh yeah, you know, like we don't have to quite figure out what we're doing here, but this is where the bridge is going to be, and this is what the chords are going to be. And we'll kind of figure out, like I have a couple ideas and they might have a couple ideas of what we do there. So it's just a matter of like, you know, with the arrangement, working with the producer, but it's good to get that like kind of, you want to get like a general idea of what your arrangement's going to be up front. References, I mean, references are so important. So if you don't know what you want, it's like the person who goes out in a boat and they don't really they just start paddling. You're not really going to get anywhere if you don't know where you're going. And the references help guide the production decisions. They help guide the instrumentation. They help guide the tempo. They'll actually dictate a lot of this stuff. They'll help guide like what style of vocal is needed, and as well like the type of writing. Goes back to what we were talking about, like when it comes to songwriting and production. There's a lot that kind of mixes in with this. But bringing references into production, once you have the song written in that style, the next logical step is taking those references to the producer, and you want to do this up front before you go into the studio. And the important reason, we'll go into this later a little bit, but it's very important to do this like before you actually go to the studio, because you might find that the producer that you're working with, they're not good at that style of music, or they might just like they might not like really have an idea about that. This stuff has happened before. So it's just like, it's really good when you're starting to negotiate with somebody. You could be like, this is the song I have. These are the references I have. That you might reach out to them because they have a song that's already like kind of in the ballpark that you're looking for. And you'd be like, I loved this track that you did. I think it's very similar in the style to this song that I want to make with this reference. So this is a conversation that you could have with a producer. That could be very helpful and fruitful in terms of like building a successful collaboration. So having the references handy and then using those references when you're shopping around will help ensure that the tracks that you're building are kind of on target, and also that they can actually be pulled off by the producer skillfully. So that's a very important thing. And then just like you bring them into the session and you can kind of have a conversation, a creative conversation about, you could be like, oh, I really love the intro on this, but then I really like when the electric guitar comes in, replacing the piano in the second verse. So you could use that to like kind of talk, you just use it as like ideas, and you can, but then sometimes you could be like, I want a song that sounds pretty much like this, but with it has like different chords, different things. So there's sound alikes, there's like references for inspiration. It's really, there's no rule with that, but it really depends on like what you're looking for. So your references are important. So instrumentation selection. So I've had a number of times an idea of what I thought might be, just as a writer and as an artist, an idea of what might be like the best instrument as like the main instrument. A lot of the stuff when I was early on was like, I was playing acoustic guitar a lot. And I had a couple times where producers are like, why don't we try this on the piano? And I do this all the time as a producer now. I'm like, you know, do you play, if they do a different instrument than the main instrument they play on, I'm like, do you play any other, do you just play guitar? Or do you play piano? I might like to hear what it sounds like if they play it on piano. I might like to hear what it sounds like if I play it on guitar, or just kind of think about like the song in like a different context. It can sometimes be cool. Especially if like with acoustic guitar, it's really a fine line right now between like, you know, cool indie singer-songwriter stuff and stuff that sounds like it was like acoustic rock from like 15 or 20 years ago. So you have to be really careful with that. And this is where like the skill of a producer it can really come in handy, because they might be able to hear the song recontextualized in different ways and be like, ooh, that might sound really cool with this instrument or this piano player, or, you know, this, maybe even like it's just a synth thing instead of, and drums instead of anything acoustic. So instrumentation selection, I think, is like something that you want to kind of think about in the pre-production sometimes, because you'll be like, oh, let's see what it sounds like this. Let's see what it sounds like that. Because then you might need to line up a piano player. You might need to line up something else. It's something that's important to happen. And then scheduling, timeline, you got to make sure that whoever you're working with, like, you can get the job done. And it's like part of pre-production is kind of having an idea. And this is a part that also goes into like the negotiation of everything, is figuring out like, well, when are we recording? When are we finished with this thing? When is it going to mix? When are we am I going to send it to a outside mastering person or outside mixer or both? You know, what's the plan there? And the producer can help out with that. And that can sometimes go into the pre-production as well. Sometimes you don't really know exactly how fast it's going to go. You can have a guesstimate of it, but then once you get in the room and you start like talking, you get a game plan going, you're like, oh yeah, we can do this in this day and do this on this day, and then we'll be done. So, this is something that I feel is very important. Cannot stress this enough, is practicing your song to a click. The key with this is like, you don't want to become like a metronome when you're performing in the studio, but at the same time, if you're not used to playing naturally to a click, it's going to potentially totally throw you off when you're in the studio. And it's just something that as an artist, as a songwriter, if you are the one who is planning to play the primary instrument on the track, it's just a really good idea to just get in the practice of playing the song that you've written to a click. I just think it's part of what like it's part of the preparation that you'll want to do going in. It's really your best friend. Yeah, it totally is your best friend, and it might suck. It might be very difficult. Some people, it's really easy to play to a click. Some people, it's really hard. Sometimes songs don't need a click. I've recorded a whole album where I was playing guitar and the other songwriter was playing piano, and we didn't use a click the entire time. We just had like our own kind of internal timing with it, and it all worked out beautifully. But it was like, it was a challenge. It was a technical challenge, but I wouldn't suggest doing anything like that unless you've got pretty good kind of consistent timing with things, and it can kind of feel, when you're performing a song live, you can kind of keep a regular tempo with things. There's going to be types of songs where that's going to be cool. It all just comes down to like what the song is. I mean, it probably wouldn't be good to do that with an electronic, like an EDM song or anything like that. You definitely need the beat for that. Yeah. So, well, and I think it's like, you know, the sterileness of it is something that when you learn to kind of tune it out a little bit, and you don't have the click turned up too loud too, that can also kind of take some of the spontaneity out of the performance. But just learning, it can also be like adjusting the click so it works better for you too. Sometimes double timing the click can make all the difference. It just depends on like where the rhythmic accents are on something, can help or harm that in terms of like, you know, being able to use a click. All right, so I'm done with pre-production. So that's all the stuff that I typically am very engaged with whoever I'm working with, and when we're in the process of getting ready to record stuff. How are we doing for time? Okay, we're doing all right. I'm gonna try to speed up through this because I want to make sure there's a little bit of time to ask questions. So tracking. So these are my suggestions for anybody when you do start working with a producer, is to show up ready to go, warmed up and awake. Change your strings, be prepared. It's all part about being like, now you've decided that you're going to be a professional in the music industry. You got to start showing up to your sessions. You've already done that with like the songwriting, and you're continuing to flex those muscles. Now is the time to start flexing these muscles when it comes to producing. Show up prepared, show up like mentally alert, get a good night's sleep, be ready to like invest your emotional energy into it. and yeah, it's just like it's important. I think it's a part of showing up every day, but you got to show up especially on the days where it's like most important. Like this is a really important day, the day that you come in to record something. Do your best and trust. It's easy to be critical. I think it's the producer's job to let you know if the performance is up to snuff or not. I just know I'm my own worst critic. When it comes to like singing vocal stuff, I've gotten a lot better at it now. I know when I'm like kind of out of what's like acceptable for me. But there was a time where I would be very insecure about like, certain aspects of my performance. And I've fortunately been able to work with some awesome producers that were able to say, you know what, trust me, this is really good. And then, once you have that confidence, it's part of the trust. Obviously you got to learn to trust when the producer is telling you this is good. This is like hitting the marks, that it actually is hitting the marks. But that is something that you will discover with your producer over time. And this could pertain to like any aspect of it, the vocal, the drums, the bass, whatever it is in the song, the arrangement of the song, there's a certain amount of trust that you have to put in the producer to kind of be when I was talking about like the producer kind of sits in the chair, they hold the space. They're also the, I don't know why it seems like there we go. It's kind of out of focus there for a second. They are the, basically the quality control too. So as the quality control for it, it's important that the producer, is able to assert that and just communicate that to you. And when they say like, hey, this is really great, you don't make them like do like 5 more takes of it because it's really unnecessary. So these kinds of things can come up and it's understandable. I heard a story fairly recently about a singer who really insisted on not using any tuning on their voice. And what it did was it put the producer in a very awkward position because they knew that tuning was pretty much going to be needed unless it's a very exposed, very up close vocal. And there was really no way around that unless the performance was absolutely perfect and they were consistently not hitting pitches in certain parts. And it just made things really difficult. So in a case like that, could it be worth it to maybe be open to having a little bit of tuning on your vocal? Probably, because the producer wants, I will say, like, just for my work is my reputation are like pretty much all I have as a producer. So, the quality of my work is so important to me that I would never make a suggestion to a track that would just be let's just get this thing done. It's really not about that. I want to make sure that like, as I'm going through, we're making the right decisions. So if I'm like saying, hey, we could use some tuning on this vocal, it'd be, probably good. I would suggest for everybody when they're working with a producer to trust the instincts of the producer. But there's going to be emotional stuff that comes up around things. And I think with that particular situation, there was some like emotions that were coming up in the dynamic between the producer and the artist. And these are just some of the complex things that can happen in like the creative process. There's very real feelings that can happen as a result of this. Years ago, I had a singer come into my studio, was singing into a $10,000 microphone, and they were having a really difficult time. They were having an emotionally difficult time singing lyrics that were happy. And they literally at one point just kind of stormed out of the room and nearly knocked the microphone over. I had to catch it, went outside and were just like inconsolable, just like emotional. So these kinds of things can happen. It's crazy. These types of things can happen in the studio. Every story you've ever heard about like people breaking stuff or people getting angry or these things can happen, but I don't think they don't really happen for me. I've only had that happen like one time where I've had like somebody acting really kind of unstable. But these kinds of things can happen. The real emotions, like I am good at coaxing an emotional vocal from people, an emotionally true vocal. And it's like, it makes me kind of proud that like people get emotional when they work with me on the vocal stuff, because it tells me that like, it's coming from like a real place. And it's really great. So, yeah, forgot where I was there. To just trust the producer. They'll let you know if it's up to snuff. Don't take things too serious too. This is the other thing. It's like, it goes in along with like being too critical. It's like, if you take things too seriously, you're not going to enjoy any of the process of creating something with somebody. And what's the point of living a life where you're not enjoying what you're doing? Like, we're not here to do this to like, producing music shouldn't be torture. Songwriting should be enjoyable. You know, making music should be an enjoyable experience that you remember when you're, you know, when you're in your older age and you're kicking back and you're thinking about like the good times that you had in your life. You know, you want to put these kinds of experiences, they're going to be the kind of experiences that you remember the rest of your life. And just a moment to moment, like, you want to just show up and enjoy the process. So I feel like that's a really important thing to, as far as like a producer goes, but it's also, I think, having as like a songwriter and as an artist, have the right attitude when it comes to like, you know, it doesn't have to be like the most serious process either. You know, just like, don't take it too seriously, because that's another one of those things that can kind of make a performance kind of tight. And like, you want to be like, you want the emotion that you're trying to convey into the microphone. If you want like a tight kind of like kind of vibe from the vocal, then that might work. But, you know, probably if you're making like cheery ad music, that kind of seriousness isn't going to work, because like, you're not putting that joy and that fun into the process. If you're making a fun, joyful song, you gotta, you know, take breaks during the recording sessions, bring snacks. Sure. It's really easy to just like keep going and going and going. And it's good to take a break. I force myself to take breaks like fairly regularly, a little stretch here and there. So it's important. Be ready. This is another, I think this is probably the most important thing, especially when it comes to like vocal performances in the studio, is to be ready to feel and to be ready to invest those feelings into the record. So it's a thing where if you really aren't feeling what it is that you're singing, it's going to come across. Like, I'm not going to like, it's so many times. I've had it so many times where like, and if you're holding back in some kind of way, people are going to hear it. Now, there's some times where holding back emotionally might work in a song where you want kind of more reserved, kind of like tight kind of performance in parts, and then it really like kind of opens up in the choruses or like as the song develops. That is a technique. But, you know, in general, you want your feelings to really go into the microphone. And the only way you can do that is it's all in here. You know, that has nothing to do with like whether you're a good singer or not. It all has to do with your conviction. And if your conviction's in alignment with what you're trying to accomplish when you're standing in front of the microphone, then you're probably going to be in pretty good shape. This is another thing I think is so important. Remember, it doesn't matter what 50 people outside of the room think of your song. This is like, because we can bring in people that aren't even in the room into the process. We can be thinking, oh, will this person think this, or will this agency like this? It's like, I've found that is very unhelpful for the most part. And I feel like that can kind of extend too in like the umbrella that can sometimes be thrown at. Now, this is different. We're in a class here, and we're teaching you all how to get feedback, and we're going to be doing some like, you know, some feedback on production. We always do feedback on production in kind of like a larger scope. And we encourage people to, if they don't have the trusted people yet to go to for feedback, we want you to build these relationships. But in general, what we don't want is, we don't want like 50 cooks in the kitchen. And we definitely don't want cooks in the kitchen that aren't even in the room with us. So it's like, that's a mentality that can creep in sometimes during the process. It can also be a very real thing that can happen when you send a song out for feedback. Once it's starting to be produced, you get like 50 different opinions, and half of them might be sort of in alignment. Maybe those are the ones that you listen to. If you're getting general feedback from everybody, about a certain thing about the song, then or you get that feedback from somebody who really knows what they're talking about, and maybe it's like a gatekeeper of sorts. They might have a finely tuned ear that you can appreciate and might be able to kind of suss something out. Like it might be more effective to have like 2 or 3 of those types of folks give you some feedback on a song rather than like kind of a shotgun approach to things, which can end up being a little confusing. I've literally had it before where somebody asked for like feedback from like 50 people and then ended up like taking 6 or 7 pages of notes and sent them to me in an email. And it's like, it's, you can imagine it can get really, part of the job, I didn't take it personal or anything like that. Part of the job of the producer is to like communicate this. It's like, look, we can't, like, you can't please everybody. I think that's like what it boils down to is you can't please everybody. And also the thing that's most important when you're producing a song is if you believe in it, and if you and the producer that you're trusting in, if you both buy into it 100%, you love the track, that's probably way more important than like, what 20 folks think about your song. Part of the conviction that you bring into the process, part of the conviction that you take out of the process, and you're going to be taking that confidence and pitching it. Now, granted, if your production isn't up to snuff or you're having like other issues, getting specific feedback is very helpful because you can then know, well, if you and the producer, you're like, well, we aren't sure if this is working. Why don't we get some feedback on this and see if we get some ideas? So this can kind of happen too with even in the production experience. But one thing I definitely would recommend is keeping the process between you and the producer for the most part, and really like when it's needed, get some outside feedback. But if you bring too many people and too many cooks in, you're probably not going to like the results. You're going to end up with a product that is you're going to end up with a record that's just very, it might sound Frankensteined by the end of it. It might sap, like we were talking about, like you want real emotion. It's going to kind of like sterilize and sap all of the like humanity out of a performance sometimes. It's just like things that I've seen both in productions that I've been, things that I've produced, as well as things that I've gone and worked with other producers on. So just something worth thinking about. All right. It's much easier to add to a simple production than take things out from a cluttered one, I've found. So I would say your foundation is by far the most important thing. If you can make a song sound great in a very simple way, that's like the key. That's what you want. You want everything in your foundation to sound fantastic. If that isn't the case, then adding a bunch of crap on the top of it isn't really gonna help. And in fact, I've found on a couple of occasions that it was just like, it gets to a point where things get so cluttered, you don't even know what to take out. And then you kind of have to start from square one. And then you realized, oh wait, there was something in the foundation here that was not working. And now we got that fixed. We can just add like 1 or 2 things and then it's all good. Yeah, don't polish a turd. I mean, yeah, that's, I guess. I mean, hopefully you're not working on turds. I think that's what I would say. You don't want to be working on turds. And that part of that is like the song that you bring in. You don't want your song to be a turd that the producer has to polish up in any way. And at the same time, you don't want the producer to be making stuff that then your mixer has to polish up because the production was a turd. Or you don't want like the mastering person trying to fix a mix that's awful because, the mix is a turd. Like you don't want to, sorry, too many turd references here, but it's true. Like you want quality at every step of the way. And that's how you're going to avoid these kinds of situations, just the folks you bring in, as well as like the quality of the work that's being done. You're going to pretty much be able to avoid that. Not taking questions yet, but, and I've got like quite a bit. I'm just keeping a look on the time here. All right, we're done there. Almost done with these, and then I'm going to read through something as well after this. Don't be afraid to communicate with your producer. You got to just like have that rapport. If there's some type of like, if you're intimidated or whatever, you gotta break through that really quick, because you're not going to get anything done if you're not direct and if you're not communicating what it is that you want. Because like the worst thing that you can do is kind of let something happen without, especially if there's parts where you're like, I don't really like the sound of that kick. It's like a lot of times the producer wants I would argue, like for me, it's all the time. I want the people that I'm working with to be involved. If they don't love the kick, let's go out and find another one. I'm not like, this has to be. There's very few times where I'm like really going to go to bat for something. The only times I really go to bat for something is if I feel like it's like they might be having like some kind of like criticism, self-criticism thing kind of factoring into it. I might go to bat for something that I feel is just really cool. A lot of times like the little weird things or like little edits that don't get quite edited all the way, but there's just some kind of cool little thing. Some slightly pitchy thing can sometimes be like the magic in a line. And I just, sometimes like that, I'll go to bat for stuff like that, but speak up, definitely speak up when you're in sessions. And then the last piece for like, just for tracking is like, is to roll with the punches when snags come up. Software can crash. Your number one choice for a drummer might go on tour. It's important to get the job done. I would say it's more important to get the job done than get caught up in like a story. Like, it could get your production could be a story of like waiting for the drummer to come back or something like that, for example. And that's not what you want. You want to be able to be fluid in these types of situations, and you will get more and more fluid as you work at this level on things. Most producers that are well established, they have a network of resources that they can draw upon including like session musicians. That would be great. I know like 4 or 5 drummers that I could call and have a really good drum track done. Probably by the end of the week. I'd have to check their schedules, but it's important. Part of the value that a producer can bring to the table is the quality of the musicians that they know and people that they can tap into and know like how those folks can fit into a production. So that's just one example, but you want to be able to like kind of be fluid with things, flow with it, not get in the way of the production getting done. All right. So I got one other thing I want to read. It's a little long, but I feel like this is important because I feel like this is like maybe one of the most important decisions is like who you're working with, knowing what you're bringing to the table. Now that we've talked about a little bit about the process and like, what I've found are like kind of the keys to success in both like getting ready and then actually recording and executing on the production. The next thing I want to talk about is how do you get started? Like how do you negotiate with a producer? How do you find a producer? How do you, when you do find the producer, how do you start the negotiation process and kind of like what are we bringing into the picture? I feel like it's really important. It's an important talk. I wish somebody had talked to me about this like when I moved to town 15 years ago, because I think it would have helped me out a lot. So I want to say like, the old saying, fast, cheap, quality, you can have 2 or 3. I think that artist-producer negotiations are like that, but they're a lot more complex. Ideally, you want an experienced producer who is strongly connected to the licensing world that can knock the production out of the park in the exact genre you're writing in. They totally have the right vibe for it. They have time open on their schedule and can definitely get the job done by the deadline. You have a strong brand as an artist, already have a substantial following, have a track record in landing placements. You bring a top-notch, ready-to-go song, have professional grade talent involved, have an ample budget to pay the producer fairly. You're both a dream to work with, and your collaboration will definitely go smoothly. And it sounds like a dream come true kind of situation, right? It sounds like there's a lot of things that would have to fall into place for all that to happen. So in real-world music production, it's rare for all of these things to line up exactly. It's understandable considering how many factors are at play, but it's a good thing to go into all this with eyes totally open because it will really help you understand what's involved when hiring a producer. Now, when negotiating with producers, here's some of the things that typically factor in. How experienced are they? A new producer, like a college grad or somebody who's new to professional producing, will typically be more open to negotiations in terms of like their rate. 2, how connected are they? Do they have ins already with licensing agencies or other sync touch points? If they do already, that's probably a sign that they have done a fair amount of work in this world already and they kind of know where the standards are and like what types of music are being used for what. 3, the references you're bringing in. Can the producer totally nail the vibe you're looking for? Is this genre totally in their lane? Does the producer make beats well if you're working in a genre that really depends upon the beat, for example? 4, what is your current status as an artist? Do you already have an established following? Do you already have placements? This can factor into negotiations, as it can be more appealing to a producer to work with someone who already has a strong brand that's easier to pitch. As we've heard from pretty much every single guest we've brought on, artists that already have something going on outside of sync entirely, they have, like, in a way, an advantage over people that don't already have that. So it would make sense that in terms of like negotiating with a producer, that's part of the value you could potentially bring to the table in terms of negotiations. So 5, the quality of your songs. This factors in big time. The better your songs, the more attractive you are as a potential collaborator. 6, your budget. This is another huge factor. Some producers require substantial upfront budgets to work with, while others are more open to less expensive deals that involve master splits or backing considerations. Some may even be open to purely spec type deals if they are involved in the writing or the master, or they just really believe in the artist or the song. These types of things happen. So availability. When it comes to scheduling, this is number 7. When it comes to scheduling, is the producer available to take on the project and complete it in the time you're looking to finish it? Are you available to work with them with their schedule? So that's another thing that can kind of factor into all this. It could be like a great collaboration, but the only window that they have is like, 3 months out, and you need it like by the end of the month. Next up, 8, talents. What talents do you have to share in collaboration with a producer? Are you a professional level singer in the genre you're targeting, a crazy good drummer or keyboard phenom? The raw talent brought into a project can actually like be negotiating leverage. It's like that whole thing. It's just like, what are all the things you're bringing to the table? That's what I'm trying to show here. Collaborativeness. Are you easy to work with? Can you trust the producer to do their job? Are you known for being very particular about the production process? Experienced producers can usually feel this out during negotiations. Obviously, most of them prefer to work with folks who they enjoy a fluid music creation process with. So I'm not saying like producers are out for, they're really like trying to look out for people that are going to be like really like picky about certain things, but I've had a couple times where somebody has kind of approached me with a very intense kind of plan for something that I can tell is just super detail oriented, and they have, it seems like it's a very rigid idea of what could work. And I've had in a couple of cases, I'm just like, I don't feel like this game plan really vibes for me, with what I would want to do. So, but every producer is going to be different. So there's all different kinds of situations. If I'm feeling it's going to be like I like to work with people who have an open mind about what could be best for the song. And I think that most producers probably feel the same way. So that's something you can bring into the process in terms of like just your willingness to collaborate with them and trust their ideas. The fewer things you bring, so I talked about all those different things, those 9 things. The fewer things you bring to the table out of all that list, the harder it is going to be for you to find a producer who has the qualities you want to bring to the table in collaboration with you. It's like a meeting of resources in a way. That's all I think that like artist producer negotiations are. It's a people thing, yes, but it's like basically it's a meeting of resources. So for a successful collaboration, there has to be, both sides have to bring stuff to the table. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of a lopsided thing. And I think this is where a lot of like the problems can kind of come up and people end up settling for certain situations. So, the things that the artists bring to the table: songwriting, vibe and references, budget, status, talent, availability, and their kind of like easygoingness, willingness to collaborate. Like those are the things that the artist can bring to the table. Things that the producer can bring to the table: potentially songwriting, vibe and experience in your genre, connections, status as a producer, talent, availability, and collaboration. So there's a lot of the same things that the producer brings to the table that you bring to the table as somebody who's hiring the producer. Now, it's rare to have all these qualities on both sides. You don't need to despair. Like the whole point of this talk is not to be, oh God, I got all these things I got to think about. There's no need to despair. A lot of the time you can get a lot of great work done if enough of these factors are present on both sides that they play well off of each other. So that's the key, is finding someone who teams up well with you with the resources you're bringing to the table. all the things you bring to the table as an artist can be potentially used as leverage in negotiating. Just remember, at the end of the day, many professional producers have real bills they have to pay and are doing it for a living. They may not be open to negotiating their upfront rate much. But as I said before, it's like, there's all kinds of situations. If it's a great song, if it's like if the artist, the vocal talent is just phenomenal. There's situations where like every single producer out there would do something on spec. There's very few producers, I think, in the world that would not do anything on spec ever, you know? So yeah, that's what I got in terms of this. I got like a whole, like, it looks like another like 20 minutes I can answer questions about any of this stuff. Hopefully this like basically like is in terms of production, telling you about like just all the things that I've like experienced in terms of like the pre-production, everything about the philosophy of being a producer to like, you know, what goes into it with the pre-production, going into it with the production, and then like really kind of giving you an outline of all the things that factor in when you're starting to negotiate and figure out who it is that you're working with, so that you can have like a really successful collaboration with whoever you're working with. Yeah, I'll post the list. Yeah, I have all these notes and I'll copy and paste them. I'll post it with the replay for sure. Yeah, spec is free. So spec is not free. So that's a misconception. So spec means that it's speculative. It means that it's like, for example, one speculative deal that I might have done like when I was first starting out would have been like, I'll produce the track for free, no upfront cost to you. Well, I won't produce it for free, but no upfront cost to the artist, with the stipulation that upon a placement, I'll recoup the first $1,000 that comes back from that to recoup my production costs. So that's like one example. And then maybe I'd do like a 50-50 split on the master for that or something like that. You know, I wouldn't do a deal like that right now for anything. I don't really do that kind of stuff anymore, but it's like, you know, there's different types of spec deals that are out there. Yeah, that's one of them though. Let's see what else. If you want to cut a good spec deal, offer them double rate on the back end. Yeah, I mean, these are all the thing that's like, it's like you can give people like 80% of something, but if nothing ever happens with it on the back end, it's 80% of nothing. That's one thing you gotta take into account. And especially like producers that like, you know, most working producers, they need to generate a certain amount of like upfront kind of income that's coming in, so that it's part of those things where it's like, if you really believe in a song and you really want to put your own resources into it in a way, then it can make sense a lot of times. And I do quite a bit of spec work, but the spec work that I do now, it's like kind of based in like briefs that are like very targeted. We know there's like a realistic chance of something happening with them, or they're just artists that I really freaking dig. And I know that I can totally nail the vibe of, and they might have something going on the artist side that I'm like, I see a lot of potential in this on the licensing side. So these are the kinds of situations that you may, as a producer, want to invest in those types of situations. And as an artist, you might be looking to create the kinds of situations in your artistic career that make you appeal to producers in that way. I'd gladly pay you tomorrow for a hamburger today. I don't think it's like, it's not like a Willy kind of thing. It's like, I think it's, you know, in the end of the day, it's whatever works for the producer in the time they are in their career. I think for the most part, I think is how it works. Do you do a lot of co-producing? Oh yeah, I do a ton of co-producing. Co-producing is so fun. I've actually done more co-producing this last year than I've ever done in my life. And it takes practice, just like with anything. I think the thing with co-production that can be tricky is just knowing what your lane is in the production process. I'm like, you know, when it comes to, some producers have found I'm very helpful with vocal stuff in collaboration with them. Not to say I don't do great work in other aspects of like instrumentals and different stuff, orchestrating orchestral kind of arrangements and things like that, strings and stuff. I do quite a few things well, but like one of the things I've been trusted on a lot recently is doing vocal production. So on a number of projects recently, I've just kind of slotted right in as like the main vocal guy, doing a ton of top lining. And so, yeah, I think like as far as like co-productions go, there's a certain amount of experimentation you'll have to do to kind of feel like out the process of it. And I think as with any new collaboration, you'll just have to kind of build that trust. So I've had a couple co-productions that didn't go too well. The one that didn't go, there's one co-production that didn't go too well like 3 years ago. And it was because there was like a power kind of struggle, like who's sitting at the desk kind of vibe. That was kind of weird. But like for the most part, most of my collaborations are just really fun and easygoing when they aren't momentarily like a pain and we're trying to figure out a solution to something. So I think that you're gonna figure that out, but just do it. I think that's the best way to start. Be clear and upfront with what you're doing. Try to communicate up front, like whose roles, what people are going to do. Have an open mind to like that maybe changing at some point, but just keep in communication about it. And I don't think you'll have a problem. I think you'll probably find it's a lot of fun. Do you have a list of producers for those who might have a hard time? Yeah, so that is a good point. I'm actually going to make a note of this because it's something that I talked with the team about before we even began this cohort. Let me just make a note. Is we're going to make a list of producers and just folks that might be available to work with. As well, I want to encourage anybody in this group who is a producer to just let me know. Maybe send me a link to if you're looking for people to collaborate with and potentially hire you to work on their projects, or just like enter into some type of a business arrangement with you. Just hit me up. Let me send me the link to your website or whatever your samples are and stuff like that, so that people can check out your work, and maybe also your contact information would probably be helpful too. So yeah, we're looking to build that out like a little resource for everybody. But it's never too early to just start like, you can start like knocking on some doors, posting in the group. I'm sure some of the producers in this group are already establishing themselves as very talented, and you already kind of know who some of those folks are. So yeah, just start getting the dialogue going. Do you do vocals in other languages? I have done a little bit. It's one of those things where you just, when I've recorded vocals in other languages, I just kind of have to trust the singer that they know the right enunciation and they're getting the performance across. Yeah, it's not easy when you don't know, I'm not bilingual. I know a little bit of Italian. I know a little bit of Spanish. I know a little bit of Japanese. I've actually taken like a lot of lessons. I took 4 semesters of Japanese, and I remember very little of it now, but do you have a list of singers? I'm a session singer, have access to a studio and set up my own. I don't have a list for singers, but as far as like resources, I don't think I'm going to put a list together for singers. But I think, as far as, I'll think about that. Maybe you all can definitely, I'm just thinking as far as like what I'll have the time to put together. I think I could definitely put together a list of producers. As far as like singers, it's yeah, I think it's just a matter of like, if you're a singer, whatever you're talented at, just bring that to the group and let everybody know about it. I feel like that's actually, I'm going to make that your assignment for this week. Your assignment for this week is to think about all the things that you can bring to the table in collaboration with others specific to production. And I want you to base it. It doesn't even matter. Like, take this list that I have. It could be any of those things. Could be resources. Could be, you could literally say, I have like a budget to record with. And that's something you can bring to the table. Like, I want you to, I'm an excellent, like, professional grade session vocalist. whatever it is that you can bring to the table in collaboration with others in a production, I want you to put that together and post it to the group. Please wait until the replay posts those so that you can have the whole list so you can take a look at that. That's your assignment for this week, by the way. So that's a great question. I'm realizing this needs to happen. How common is it or effective to work with a producer remotely? Does it handcuff them if you're recording your own tracks and sending them the files? I would say I do tons of collaborations remotely. And I've done a ton of really great work with some folks in Nashville recently. I would say that like it's the challenge for me. I love vocals so much, and I think vocals are so important to a successful song. It's hard when I don't have the ability to work with them directly in the vocal booth. I don't really find that it works to be involved, like sitting there like virtually while they're singing tracks somewhere else. I did that one time and it turned out okay. I more just made a friend. Actually, it was funny. They moved out to LA and we all became buddies. But it's like those kinds of things can happen too all the time in the studio. But yeah, I don't feel like it was like a very fluid thing for me. I think that's like the main challenge is like as a producer, making sure that everything is kind of hitting the bar quality wise. Sometimes I've found like if I'm working with somebody remotely, they might not have very good recording equipment or experience as a recording engineer. So they might, the quality of the tracks they provide me might not be up to snuff. But that's like, I think that's like probably the biggest thing is like, can you really record your own tracks to a level where they'll be helpful to the production? And I think that's like something that everybody's just got to be a little honest about, you know, when it comes to these kinds of things. Might be better to hire somebody, might be better to work with a producer who can play the instrument that you're playing. Yeah, I think that's like, as far as like, I do a ton of like remote collaborations. It's difficult sometimes with the vocals. I've had artists fly in, like after we're done with tracks, they'll just come in for a day and we'll do all the vocal stuff and it's super fun. And I can show them around LA a little bit. What else we got? Can you talk? Yeah, I've already talked about that recently, that it's not necessary that a master songs for sync, as the audio producers on the film project will want to master it. Yeah, so I hear you on this. I mean, every TV show goes through a mastering phase to make it broadcast quality, but that's not that doesn't mean you can't send them mastered songs. So. And one thing to keep in consideration is a lot of times they're listening to songs that have been professionally mastered. So in a way, if you're sending them stuff that's not mastered, it might not sound as good as it would if it was professionally mastered. And the first impression that you get, like the soup gets, or like, you know, the agency gets, might prevent it from ever getting to the place where it would get used in the first place. They might say, hey, do you have like just the unmastered version of this? Because it's kind of sounding a little toasty when we run it through the broadcast limiter. They might ask you for that. You know, it'd be good to maybe have like an unmastered version of the mix. All right. Okay, there's a spreadsheet. Yeah, cool. Start using the spreadsheet. But my assignment still stands. I want everybody to post in the group and talk about the resources that they have to bring to the table. What about having multiple references for a track? I mean, that's fine. Yeah, it's fine. I think it's like, but you gotta, it's like every song is going to be its own world in a way. So you can't say, you might not necessarily be able to say, I want the drums from this, and I want the synth from this, and I want the singer from this. They might collectively not sound as good as you're imagining, or they might not sound the way. I think the producer can kind of help you figure out, or if you're producing it, I think it's like, you'll just like start realizing, okay, this works. I think it's like the whole idea with the references is to kind of get the ballpark of where you want your production to go. If it's a sound alike, you'll want it to sound pretty damn close to like one or two songs probably, because, you know, no two songs sound super alike. You know, there's always going to be some differences. but there might be a couple songs that sound pretty similar. And then you could be like, oh, I want to be in the group with this. So if that's the case, then you'll find like the stuff that they have in common and you'll kind of work from there. Let's see what else we got. Some of these questions seem like they're dependent upon me answering them as I'm talking. And unfortunately, I can't really tell what they're. Yeah, there is a bonus on recording vocals, and I'm going to be scheduling that with them very soon. So whoever qualified for that bonus, I'm not sure if that's a bonus that's class wide or if it was a specific sign up bonus, but it's definitely like now is definitely the time that we're going to start. You'll be putting this stuff to practice, especially if you're recording your own vocals. And I definitely think like now is the time to do this. So we'll get it scheduled in the next week or two. That's cool. Let's try. I got like another 5 minutes. I got to go to the dentist is the unfortunate out here. We already answered that one. Do you master songs yourself or send them to a mastering studio? Yeah, so it's a mix. So we're going to be going through mixing, and I'm going to go through mastering separately. But just the quick answer is it depends on the budget. It depends on the time frame. I do send it to outside mastering engineers. I send outside mix engineers. I probably more frequently just master it myself in the box. I use a number of plugins. I mean, I'll share all the stuff that I do later. Happy to do that. Main things that happen during mastering are like making sure that it has like kind of that it's up to like the volume that it needs to be, and that there aren't any frequencies that are getting in the way of the I think like one of the main things is like making sure that there aren't any subtle frequency stuff that's getting in the way of a mix translating. Part of it has to do with the mix, but the mastering can also address this is making sure that like when you're listening to it on different devices, it's translating, meaning that you can still get a good, enjoyable, like super pro version of the song, no matter what device you're listening to it on. And also part of mastering is making sure that your levels fit within the broadcast standards and aren't hitting things too hot, causing, part of the mastering as well is like, understanding the formats that you're sending their songs out to, because there's different, it's a complex matter. Yeah. It's like, I think this is going to need like it's definitely going to I'll have a talk about this for sure. Because there's a lot of stuff to go over with mastering, but yeah, I mean, a lot of indie producers will mix and master as well as produce. So as well as write, I can do everything fairly well. I'm not, the thing is like, I know what I'm good at and what I'm not. And I also don't have a big ego about it. If I'm like, I feel comfortable all the time. Like I'll go to an artist. I'll be like, you know what? I feel like this is a good mix. I feel like your mix would be a lot better if we hired somebody who's really good in the genre at mixing. And, we might hire an outside mastering engineer. The mixer might be somebody who also does like kind of a mastering job in the box. So there's all different kinds of situations, but you got to be willing to do what's best for the song. I feel like every time. Yeah, all the time. I mean, I don't think Ingrid Michaelson was much of a thing until she got all those Grey's Anatomy placements. As far as like artists that have been discovered right after they got placements, I think it can go both ways. Any artist that gets on an Apple spot is gonna see like a huge bump. Let's see, I got time for probably another question or two. Seeing a lot of repeats here. Yeah, I got to keep my teeth. Yeah, I'm safe from the fires. It was just, it's kind of crazy because the evacuation zone was literally like 1.5 miles from my apartment, and you could see the fires from where I'm at. It's actually like a pretty clear day today. It was kind of nasty yesterday. I think it's mostly contained now. How good should a work tape be before approaching a producer? I mean, a work tape's a work tape. A work tape is an idea. I mean, I think that if the work tape really sucks in terms of like just the quality of it and the timing and the performance of it, I mean, I'd make sure like, even if it's a work tape, make sure you took the time to like get a really good version of this, of the song down. It's helpful, you know? At the end of the day, if the work tape quality isn't the best, it's something, if it's a great song, a producer can hear it though. Yeah, and thanks for all the well wishes and stuff. It's just I send out all my my prayers to everybody who's affected too. I got a friend of mine who rescued, like she works with horses, and she was actually on the news. She was wrangling like I think 20 or 30 horses to a safe zone yesterday. A lot of people and a lot of animals too involved in it. I mean, unmastered stems, but the rest, I just usually hear about like mastered stems and mixes, you know? I feel like there is no shortage of different types of mixes and mastering situations that you could ask for. At the end of the day, you know, whether the producer has, if they're also doing the mixing and the mastering, whether the producer has it in the budget to be able to spend like a day and a half burning all these mixes. It's just something you have to negotiate with the producer. I typically don't go overboard with that kind of stuff when I'm working with somebody, because I'm available. I'm not going anywhere. A lot of the indie producers that I work with are the same way. They're like, if you just need something, just let me know if you need like a certain mix of something, and I can just like get it to you. You know, it's part of the gig. I'll answer one more question. Unfortunately, that's all I got. Then I got a jet. I got this tooth thing I got to take care of, but let's see. Oh, cool. You got an Apollo Twin. Good reverb. I don't really use the reverbs on the Apollo. I'm sure that some of the reverbs on some of the UAD stuff is good. I really haven't played around with the reverbs on there. Most of the stuff that I use on there, I use the compressors all the time, and they've got a lot of great plugins. Actually, one of my favorite plugins is the Massive Passive mastering EQ. I use that all the time when I'm like mixing in the box and mastering in the box here at home. As far as just good reverbs, just in general, a few that I like. I really like the Steve Slate stuff. I just got the Slate bundle and I love it. Their Luscious plates are really good. The vintage Verb Suite's really great. I have the Fab Filter Pro R. I like that a lot. I've got the Valhalla stuff. The Valhalla stuff's great. The Valhalla Room I use as a reverb a lot of the time, but then they also have the Vintage Verb as well, which is great. And then I also use Shimmer. They make a plugin called Shimmer that's really dope. It's like a super long tail reverb that kind of shimmers out. It's pretty great. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time I have for questions for this time. Once again, assignment. I want you to like take a look. When the replay posts, I'll send all the notes, and I want you to like post to the group what you're bringing to the table in collaboration with others for your EP. So that's my assignment to you. Hope you got some great stuff out of this. It's been fun. Wish I could sit here and answer another like hour worth of questions. I'm sure there'll be many, many of them. Feel free to just tag me in a post on Facebook. And if they're like production related questions, I'll do my best to answer them because I want to make sure that you all have all the support that you need here during this time. I feel like it's an important, it's just a really like a crucial part of your journey on the 6-month journey that we're taking with you. So yeah, thanks. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Great start to your week. And thanks so much. I'll catch you next time. Actually, I'll see y'all tomorrow. So looking forward to it. All right, bye.